Hi Andy. So I thought about writing you a message, but it's going to be too long and I didn't want to lose you on the way. So I thought this one would be a better option. So let me show you what they didn't. And it's, well, you let me know. So you mentioned fronting. So what is fronting? It's behaving in such a way that would require an O license, right? We agree on that one. So let's have a look how LTD drivers behave as a business. That's what should have mattered in Quick Road Transport. And if we take a step back and move away from legislation and all that fuss, and just go back into the real world and just ask a few simple questions. So, who would need an operating license? Somebody that or whose main activity as business is transport, correct? Now, let's check how they behave. How does a transport company behaves? When you have a transport company and they're negotiating their rates, what are the three main factors that they consider? Distance, volume, and weight, right? So is how far, how much, and how heavy. When it comes to a limited driver, what are the factors that he's considering when negotiating his rate? It's labor over time. What kind of work and for how long? And based on that, he knows how much he would charge or what rate he would be happy to do the work for. Who else is asking the same questions as the limited driver? Imagine when you're calling an agency. What are they asking you? First two questions. What do you want my driver to do? And for how long? So far, we can see that an LTD driver looks nothing like a transport business and looks quite a bit like a recruitment agency, offering the same services as a recruitment agency. If we move forward a bit, let's think about during the day. How do they behave during the day? If we have diversion for some roadworks or an accident, what kind of event is that for any haulage business out there? It is always 100% of the cases a negative one, correct? They're going to have to pay additional fuel, additional wear and tear, additional labor, and if the vehicle is booked for two jobs for that day and this is the first one, there's a high chance he might lose the second one, which means it could be the difference between a very good day and a very bad day. What kind of event is this one for a limited driver or for an agency? Well, if they're paid by the day, right, on a day rate, then it could be a neutral one. It doesn't really matter. The driver is always booked for 13 to 15 hours, so being delayed by an hour and a half doesn't really matter, unless it pushes him into another day. But in that case, there are a lot of penalties to apply to the client because he booked it too tight. So the client is responsible to bring the driver back in time. If they're paid by the hour, then it's a positive one, because both the limited driver and the agency will both charge more. They're going to have more revenue for the day. Now this is behavior, right? We are talking about genuine behavior. How are they alike? How is a limited driver alike with a transport company and not with a recruitment agency? They have the exact same behavior. So when it comes to fronting, which is behavior, I personally do not see any resemblance between a limited driver business and the transport business. There is only one. It's our misconception that a limited driver is a transport business. So if we don't look into it and we just go by the, how would I say it? Sorry, obviously my English is not my first language, so sometimes I'm looking for the word, but general view or understanding about what he does is that he's a transport company. But if we look into it, he's not. Nothing from what he does means transport. There are a few more other things to look at, but let's go back to legislation. So, under section 58.2, the driver can be servant or agent. Now, funny enough, an agency driver is deemed as being an agent, but a limited driver is deemed as being a servant, which means in the limited driver we consider his business being the user, while if it's an agency driver we consider the client, the haulage company, being the user. Where's the distinction coming from? Because I'm guessing you've read it. There's nothing that would make that distinction. And if we don't try to understand the legislation, how the way it's written, and we just look back to the real world, nobody would ever expect for the limited driver to have an O license, because he's not doing transport. Nobody calls the limited driver to ask him for a quote for a shipment. Makes no sense. But there's a bit more that doesn't make any sense, actually. If we're looking at limited drivers, how come we have so many other companies? Basically, Quick Road Transport is the only one where Kevin Rooney made that decision. No other traffic commissioner has made such a decision. They're supporting Kevin Rooney, but nobody else has made a decision. We have all those companies where the traffic commissioners have said, have forced the operator into employing the drivers. But being an illegal operator, we're talking about the limited driver now, that's a criminal offense. Where's the prosecution? Why hundreds of companies have been forced into employing them and the traffic commissioner have overlooked a criminal offense? Even in Quick Road Transport, where is the prosecution of the driver? There isn't any. So Quick Road Transport just tried to send a message. They just forced it to try to send a message out. There is and I forgot how it's called now. There is a precedent for fronting, and fronting was properly investigated and proven, but properly investigated. In Quick Road Transport, there was no investigation, nothing. So Quick Road Transport didn't set any precedent against the limited drivers. What it did, and will be, it's going to take a while, but what it did, it actually how would I say it nicely? Kevin Rooney screwed up big time, and my work is to show that. But you mentioned fronting. Tell me, apart from that, what I've just mentioned, right? Apart from our general understanding or assumption that the limited driver is doing transport, what else would we have that would class him? There's another one. Think about a recruitment agency with 100 drivers. All the drivers are being booked, right? So they've got no more drivers to offer. And the phone rings, client asking for another driver. The company director and sole shareholder of that recruitment agency is fully qualified to drive HGVs. So if he goes as driver number 101, will that recruitment agency need a no license? The only thing that's changed is the relation of the employee with his own employer, in this case owning the business. Will that relation change the nature of the business or the nature of the relationship between the supplier of service and the beneficiary of service, right? The client and the recruitment agency? Just the relation between the employee and the employer alone? So by the fact that, so basically he can't go, right? He can send 100 drivers, but he can't, because if he will, then he's going to be the same as a limited driver. And don't fall into the trap where the agency is something else because they're a bigger business, because they have employed drivers. That's just scale. That's just the scale of the business. The relationship stays the same. The services provided are the same. Everything is the same. So scale doesn't change the nature of a business or nature of a relationship. So what do we do with that one? Can he go himself or not? And having the same services provided by a recruitment agency, we can see that that is a legal and recognized activity. Now imagine if we take a limited driver and we decide to follow the traffic commissioner's advice or guidance or meet his expectations. And for a limited driver, we will try to get him compliant. What would that mean? He needs to apply for an operating license. Well, if he does that, he needs to have financial standing. Now, he's going to drive for his client, what? A lorry each day, a different lorry each day. That's going to be 5 lorries a day, but 5 lorries a week at least. Within a month, he can drive over 20 lorries. So how much financial standing should he show in order to prove that he can afford to repair and maintain all those vehicles that basically he's never gonna maintain? How will he do his tacho locks? At the beginning, at the end of every shift for each vehicle? Are those vehicles going to run under his own license? Because basically that's what the traffic commissioner wants. Or, let's just carry on. Let's get him an operating center. How big should it be to accommodate all those vehicles that would never go to his operating center? Because they're not his. He's just driving the client's vehicles the same way an agency driver drives the client's vehicles. So we're just trying to get him to be legal, to get his business legal, not to change his whole business, right? We're not trying to make from a takeaway kebab shop, we're not trying to make him a full-blown restaurant, right? So how big should the operating center be? How about the maintenance provider? What sort of tools and equipment he must have in order to be able to never repair all those vehicles? Makes no sense. How about insurance? Because you've mentioned insurance. What vehicles? What registrations is he going to put on those insurance policies? Because again, his business is to drive clients' vehicles the same way an agency driver drives the client's vehicles. So if somebody is allowed to do that business, as a limited driver, I should be allowed to do so too. Why not? Why am I a haulage company if I'm a limited driver, and why am I not an agency? with a one man. I can be a haulage company with one man as a one man band, but I can't be a recruitment agency as a one man band. How come? It's scale. It's scale. Where in legislation we have this or something that will support differentiating this limited driver under section 58.2 between an agency driver. Why one is an agent and the other one is a servant of his own company? If you think about structure, then a haulage business is a party. Limited driver is employed by a third party. An agency driver is employed by a third party. So we have a client with two contractors. One of them is a recruitment agency, the other one is a limited driver. They're both providing the same services, but somehow we end up with one of them being legal and the other one being legal based on scale alone. That's it. Scale is the only difference. The service they provide is identical. It's identical to the letter. You might want to argue that if the work is ongoing and it's for a long period of time, then that would be the difference. What stops? First of all, if you mention that, that's IR35. Has nothing to do with road safety, has nothing to do with the 1995 Act, first of all. Second of all, we're talking about a collaboration between two businesses. So if you're saying that working with a client for too long is not okay, well, we need a legislation that says that two companies can work only for so long, and after that they become illegal just because they've been doing it for too long. If you have a one-man band haulage business, an operator, he has his own truck, he has his own low license, everything's set in place, good, and he's doing Amazon work. Has been doing it for 10 years now. Because Amazon, let's assume, they still do it as they did it in the old days. When they cancel a job, if you're on site, they pay full rate. They always pay, not like they do it on haulage exchange. You don't get 60 days end of the month, you get 7 days payment. So next week payment. You can see the rates up front, you can book whatever job you want, they respect the loading and unloading times. You don't end up with surprises where you go today and you leave tomorrow. So he decides to work with these guys, and they've been doing it for 10 years. Is there legislation that forces him into buying a second vehicle at some point? No. Scale is decided by the owner, by him. Is there legislation that will stop them from working together? No. So how come we have a set of rules for some businesses and a different set of rules for other businesses, even though we only have one set of rules? Perception. That's how we have it. We're not following the legislation here, we're not following the law, we're just forced to follow it, whatever they come up with in the morning. Now, I'm going to leave you my phone number, I'm going to give you the link for this video. You're going to have my phone number, and you can always call me. I absolutely love talking about this. So let me know your thoughts, and let me know if you want to do more of a deep dive that we already did. And in the past 2 months, well, October and November, probably aware of the RHA meetings. I've been to them, and oh boy, it was fun. And what was most interesting is how, because I've had the opportunity to ask Richard Turfitt some uncomfortable questions which he was unable to answer, and he tried to lie, basically, the audience, the other ones that were present. If you look at my article with uh, undertaking and conditions, you will see that barrister Finnegan, Darren Finnegan, made some comments and we had a debate. So I've asked Richard Tefik about drivers. Well, he said that Finnegan commented on my blog and he didn't agree with me and he agrees with Finnegan and he's a barrister. That's all he said. Well, pretty embarrassing if you knew what's happening there, because Finnegan and I had a conversation on a totally different topic, conditions and undertakings, while me and him at that day we were talking about limited drivers. So he tried, but he kind of failed. But that's going to be a new article. And I got a phone call from the RHA saying that, because I've booked every single one, and they said I've booked too many and they overbooked and I can't go anymore and they're going to cancel all my future bookings. So I've told them I'm happy to go, and if all the seats are going to be taken, I'm just going to go home. But if there's going to be a seat available, I'll just attend whatever that meeting will be. They didn't answer. I've called, I've emailed, RHA didn't answer anymore. And I've tried to book another ticket, and I was able to. There was no overbooking. Somebody didn't like me there. Who would that be? Because the RHA had nothing, unless somebody asked them to do so. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. So, yeah, let me know what you think. I'll leave you my phone number. You can call me anytime.